Hello, my name is Dr. Greg Gardner. I've got more than 18 years of program and project management experience from the corporate level and the lower levels in support structures and companies. And I would like to talk to you about project management. One of the things that the book goes over, and we'll go down through some of the ideas. They start off in chapter 1 discussing understanding project methodologies. Chapter 2, project methodologies explained. Chapter 3, Project Management Frameworks. Chapter 4, Development Methodology Selection and Utilization. Chapter 5, Implementing Project Methodologies. Chapter 6, Supporting the Methodology. Chapter 7, Project Templates and Techniques. And in Chapter 8, Project Processes and Trends. I'm not going to read the book to you. This is there for you, and I've also added 2 other project books to you for your information and your learning. I expect you to read the chapters and ask yourself, take the test questions at the end, and if you can't answer them, to go ahead and keep going through them until you do understand them. The point here is not that I tell you everything. The point is for you to take on the understanding, because the book is written very, very well. It's written, and he explains that there's no basics for a single project plan or template that'll cover everything. That's why the project processes and trends in Chapter 8, project templates and techniques in Chapter 7 are really important. In Chapters 1, 2, and 3, he actually tells you that there are different frameworks for different reasons. And some of these reasons for different frameworks are, is a project small? Is a project large? Is the project complicated, or is it very simple? These sound like something that makes a lot of sense, but you really have to ask yourself these questions at the beginning, because what may appear as simple and non-complex very often turn into be something very, very complex and very costly. Now, the 3 things that control a project are time, funding, and human resources. And I know in the book he says time, resources, and quality, because he actually includes funding under resources. So he's saying the same thing, but he's adding quality as a major part of the project that needs to be monitored and have metrics. And I disagree with him in that step, because it's been my experience over the years that you build quality into the project, and that's built into your line items of the project. So as you do that and you make sure that the requirements are being met, and you make sure that the equipment or whatever the item is that you're creating is functional and has quality characteristics, then that's included in the project plan. The 3 things that are showstoppers for me and that I've seen are time. You don't have enough time to do the project, or you don't have enough time for certain portions of the project. If they limit time, if they limit the financing, they say, okay, I want you to build this great big computer system, but you only have $100,000. That depends, and that will control what kind of pieces and equipment that you can buy. And for $100,000, if you have to have a large system for hundreds of people to use, $100,000 will not be sufficient to have quality. You may buy computers, enough laptops, but how do you network them together to make them work properly? How do you have the right software and security-ware and the different pieces that you need for a limited budget? So it's really important. A real constraint is time, and a real constraint is funding. And then the third real constraint, in my opinion, is resources, and I say that as human resources, as people. Because in computer projects and design projects, manufacturing projects, the people that you get as part of your project team are just as important as the financing and the time that's allowed. Because if you have someone in your project team that isn't trained well, they may be smart enough, they may have the education, but if they do not have the experience, it may take them longer to do certain steps than someone who is already well trained. So I hope you can see that Time is an issue, funding is an issue, but your people, the people that are given to you to work on the project, are also an issue. And this is important for you as a project or program manager to be able to, as you work with your project and the team, as you develop your plan, you implement your plan, and you start testing your plan out, you constantly go back and see all of these line items that we've created that have to be done, these steps that need to be completed to complete this task inside the project plan. Is it being completed on schedule? And if not, you need to ask yourself the question, why? And that's why a lot of these different methodologies talk about different things, because it really does depend on what you're doing, what is your project trying to create. What is the industry your project is in? A telecom industry will be totally different than a manufacturing facility. So a project will not be the same even though you both carry the title of project manager. And that's why we want to discuss these things, and that's why all these things are so very different. So what I want to first talk to you about is the differences and what is alike. The things that are alike is in every project you will always have the triple constraints. Time, you have a limited amount of time to complete your project. You have a limited amount of money, of funding or financing, and you have the limited resources of people. So you won't always get the best people to do the job, but you have to make do. The reason this is important is so that if you recognize in your project that someone is not fulfilling their task as quickly as the project plan says. For example, the first part of the system development lifecycle in the computer system is to gather requirements. Someone has come down and said, okay, I want a computer system, let's keep it simple, that will have Microsoft Office on it and everything will work. And I've got 100 people that I'm putting on this system. And these 100 people are in 2 different buildings, in the same place, but 2 different buildings. So that has defined the beginnings of the project. Excuse me. What you're saying is, okay, in this case, we've got 100 people that have to be end users. It has to have Microsoft Office and everything work inside of it. And then they're going to be in 2 different buildings. So I've got to create a network that will allow each of these people to have Microsoft Office and to be able to have a server set aside for their database, to be able to do their calculations for Microsoft Access, a place to store their papers when they're complete, and do the research and have everything stored on a server for them. So if one of their computers crashes, it doesn't lose all the data. And then because I'm a smart project manager in computers, I want to have a backup. So I want to be able to back up that database every night, or have a second database operating that if something fails, the system can fail over to it. But those cost more. So now I have to go back to the person who requested the project and say, this is the requirements, this is how I understand the project, is this correct? Once you get that yes, then you go to the people that help design the project. For our example of 2 different buildings in the same office complex that are using Microsoft Office for 100 users. Now you have to define, are you going to buy laptops for them, or are you going to buy desktops? Are you going to buy, if you buy laptops, are you going to buy a separate monitor or not? You have to define how you're going to display the information for them, and what do they require to work. So now the next step is you have to ask yourself, what industry are they in? Are they in the office environment where they're doing office work? Are they doing administrative work where they're just keeping track of things? Or are they in an environment where they're actually creating databases and watching sales and marketing and doing all these other things also? Because that may depend, if they're doing marketing or if they're doing financing, they may need 2 monitors. One to monitor the exchange rates and one to monitor the work that they're doing on their computer. So you have to define all of these things, and this is part of the user requirements, which are at the very beginning of the project. Once you define these end user requirements, now you have to go back to the person who implemented the project, usually a director or vice president, and say, okay, these are what I understand are the requirements. Are these the correct requirements? And if they say yes, then you go back to now to people that are designing it. You get the design, and then you look at prices for all these things that you've designed. So you go from gathering requirements to creating a design. Now, with this created design, you have to put cost to it. And you say, okay, to provide 100 people, we're going to go, some of them are going to have laptops, some of them are going to have desktop computers. The people with the laptop computers are doing finances, so the 5 people that are in finance, they're going to get 2 monitors, not just 1. Everyone else just gets 1 monitor. So you price all these things out. Now you take these costs and you go back to the director or vice president and say, here are your user requirements. Are these correct? And they'll tell you, well, I've already told you once. Yes. Okay. These are the costs. Are these acceptable? And the answer almost always is no. That's what's fun about being a project manager. Depends upon your organization when you get brought into a project. But at the definition phase, that's usually before people have worked out how much the costs of the systems are going to be. So part of your responsibility as a project manager is to define inside the triple constraints: time, finances, and people. So now that you've got a design, you have to go back and you say, okay, sir or ma'am, now that you've said the price is unacceptable, what part is unacceptable? What part can you live without in this design? Because I asked you for user requirements, you gave me requirements. I took these requirements to our people, and the design was created based directly off your requirements. So now I have to operate within the triple constraints, and I am telling you that this is what we came up with pricing. So if the pricing is unacceptable, please tell me what part of the pricing is unacceptable, and we'll change the user requirements. It's important to go back and change the user requirements, because at the end of the project, many times these senior executives will come back to you and say, I told you in my user requirements I wanted this, this, and this. And then you have to remind them, that's true, but you changed that when you said, I'm going to lower the costs. So what I do as a personal thing is, on my first meeting for a project, when it's before it's ever designed, before the user requirements are gathered, I get everyone involved in the project. For example, I did global IT with Motorola. And so I had projects that ran 5 different continents. It was one project, or actually a program. And so what I would do is I would meet with everybody that we could in Chicago. Everybody that couldn't was on a teleconference. We discussed the end user requirements at the beginning, what the project was supposed to be, what it was supposed to do, and the general funding options for it. And then I would write all those things down on a piece of paper, and I would submit it to everybody for a signature. So when we wrote down line item by line item, this is what the project is going to do, I got their signatures, so they agreed that these are the these are requirements that we wanted to do, and these are the costs that we believe it's going to be. Then, once we gathered requirements, again, this was the initial meeting where people were talking over the ideas, and we had experts in the room that own purchasing and design and networking and all these things. So we had all the major players at the same table at the same time, and that helped. So, and we had done projects like this before, so we estimated, okay, the cost of the servers will be this much, the cost of the networks will be this much. So we put a ballpark figure in there. And like I said, I had everybody sign it to say they were in agreement and they understood these were what we had talked about. Then I would start the systems development lifecycle and go and gather the end user requirements. If those requirements changed from anything that we had already discussed and agreed upon, they were noted. Then when those requirements were taken into the design phase to design the system to do what the end requirements needed to be, that's when I would go back and say, okay, now we look at the prices and say, is there a difference between the prices that we quoted, that we said we thought the project was going to cost, versus these new costs now that we've actually designed the system to meet the exact needs of this group? If there were any changes, whether it be more or less, I would take it back to the director or vice president, whoever had funding authority and finance authority, and say, these are the changes, do you agree with them, yes or no? If they said no, we worked it out. We talked over, okay, which line item are you having an issue with? Let's discuss this. If they said yes, then I had them sign this piece of paper saying, these are the project costs, this is the timeline, and this is the resources, this is what the end users are going to receive. And so by doing that, I kind of got everyone to buy into the project. That was really my goal, to get people at the very beginning to understand the complexity of the project, you know, how do we meet these requirements, to understand how much it was going to cost, and to understand what people's time was going to be involved in this project. And if you notice what I just said, I just covered time, resources, and funding. So I always made sure I covered the triple constraints and had those answers in writing. That way, at the end of the project or program, someone couldn't come back and say, well, that's not what I asked for. Well, I'm sorry, but this is your signature, isn't it? Well, yes, it is. Thank you so much. This is what you signed for. So it resolves problems at the ending. One of the things I try to do as a project manager, and this is just some personal information that's not going through the methodologies, because again, you can read those methodologies and understand what they're saying. They're very simple. The thing about project management is what you have to do is you have to fix things before they break. A good part of project management is what they call risk management. As you go through with the people that have to perform the project, and they're listing out all the steps that have to happen. Just for example, if you're building, let's go back to the example of our 100 people that need Microsoft Office. Some are going to have laptops in this, some are going to have desktops, and they're in 2 buildings in the same office complex. One of the issues that you have to come up with and say that is a risk is, what if our networking doesn't work? What if the connecting of the computers to the servers is not good? What happens if one of the building's electrical power goes out? What happens if both systems' power goes out? Do you have a backup on your server? And do you have backup power for your computers? That's one of the questions you have to ask. So risk management is saying, what if this happens? How do I make sure I can complete my project in time, in funding, and with the people that I have available to me? So again, no matter what you do, no matter as you look through each one of these methodologies, no matter if you look through each one of these project management frameworks, you have to ask yourself these questions. What are my money constraints? What are my time constraints? And what are my human resources constraints? Okay. What I'd also like to bring to your attention is, as part of risk management, is try to answer all the questions, the what if this happens, what if this happens, what if this breaks, what if this breaks. Try to answer those things in advance. Do not let something become a fire. When someone is trying to put a computer system together that has new software, new security-ware, new middleware, new hardware, new storage, ask the vendor or the people that are trying to do this project that you're responsible for, has this configuration ever been built for commercially before? Have you as a contractor ever built this exact configuration in the past? And if the answer is no, that's a risk. what happened to me in one of my projects is we had a computer system project that was due, and the project in normal with the normal amount of people and time and finances should have taken 4, 5, maybe even 6 months. We had 7 weeks. It was it was one of these things that the vice president said, do it, make it happen, and just do it. So we didn't have any influence to say it can't be done and, what if this, what if this. They just said, make it happen. So I saluted smartly and followed the project and started with a project plan and marching forward. I asked the question to the vendors, have you ever built this implementation before? And they said yes. That was a lie. They had not. What happened is we were trying to install software that was so new and modern, it had a timeout rate of about 1.5 minutes. So if it sent signals to another computer and that other computer did not respond within 90 seconds, it broke the connection and it was over, and it would shut down. Well, one of the data centers that was part of this network had security software that had not been upgraded for 4 years. So in 4-year time, you're probably aware in computers, things jump like 200% every year. So where the computer is this fast now, a year from now, it'll be twice as fast. And then it'll be twice as fast. So you're looking at an 800% increase in speed in those 4 years. And the computers were set up on that data center floor to only respond within 3 minutes. So this computer was sending it information. It gave you 90 seconds to reply back. The receiving system says, I've got 3 minutes. I'm taking my time. I'll get back to you when I get back to you. And because they didn't respond, it failed over. I had 3 shifts going 24 hours a day for almost a week before we figured out what the problem was. Because it wasn't anything we were implementing in our project. It was something that had not been done on the data center floor for 4 years. That was not my responsibility. It was not part of the projects, but it was something that was causing the new system to fail. So I had to learn from that, and that's what I'd like you to learn. Always expect the unexpected. When you are looking at a project, look at everything it touches. Even if things it is touching is not part of your project, it could be a negative influence on your project. Okay, so I'll go back one more time and let you know. The things to look for are the triple constraints. The triple constraints that I look for are time, how much time do I have for each line item, and how much time do I have for the project in general. How much time do I have now in looking at that? You say, okay, can I run certain things at the same time? That's simultaneous. Or do they have to be consecutive? You have to finish this before you can do this, before you can do this. And as you can see, if you can do them simultaneously, you can get them all done in a short period of time. But if you have to have something complete, like you would have to have the hardware complete before you install the software. So that installing the software is now a precedent depending on when you get the hardware installed. So the hardware has to be installed and turned on before I can load the software. So now you have a precedence. So it takes longer. So those have to be done consecutively, not simultaneously. So that adds to the length of your project. So the 3 things to look for are how much time do you have, how much financing do you have, and what are the human resources you have available to you. And we'll talk more about the other issues and methodology later. Thank you so much.